What I'm going to do for my review, and I am fully kind of expecting that Jarbo's kids are going to be kind of doing it with me. I'm going to tackle one time period a day. Okay, so like today, we're going to start off with like our first unit, and we'll hit foundational documents, and then on Monday we'll hit Gilded Age, and we'll go on until right before our test, and we'll actually have enough days to cover everything before we're done. My plan is we're going to have like a 20-minute lecture over like the main topics on that particular like time period or unit. And then the last 20 minutes of class, we'll play some type of review game. So we'll play Kahoot, we'll play quizzes. I don't know if Miss Jarbo's kids played it with me last time. Today we're going to play Gimkit. I don't know what game we're going to do today, but if you're my remote kids, you're going to see that I posted the Nearpod for this notes, and I also posted a link for Gimkit. If you have participated in class with me, you don't have to do the link. That's just for the remote kind of asynchronous kids that are doing it at their own pace. But that's what I'm planning on. So guys, this is a graduation requirement. You take this test as many times as you need to until you graduate. Okay, or you decide to go get a GED or something like that. Okay. It is my job to make sure that y'all are ready to take the test. And so I'm going to do my best to get y'all ready. So what I need from you is you paying attention as we go through this so that you are prepared for when we actually sit down and take that test on May 7th. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that before I start talking about foundational documents? Okay. When I say foundational documents, what do you think I'm talking about? Right. But what documents do you think I'm talking about before we get into it? Very important. Do we know the names of them? Constitution would be one. What else do you think I'm going to talk about? Okay. Bill of Rights. Right, those are good. Declaration of Independence, everything like that. When we did this in class, we kind of started talking about some of the philosophers who were really important. So like John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and stuff. I haven't seen them mentioned on a test. Okay, they may pop up. I'm not saying they won't be on the test. But these are 4 big documents that were inspirations to our founding fathers when they started to create the country. Okay, and so 2 of them hopefully are a little bit of a refresher from world history, and the last 2 hopefully are a little bit of a refresher from the beginning of this year and then also in 8th grade. Okay, but with Magna Carta, okay, this is an English document. The king at the time, King John, was forced to sign this. This is important mainly because it represents the first time in history where the power of the king was limited. Okay, this is the first time in history that we have really the establishment of the rule of law, where every single person in society, including the leader or the king, okay, was subject to the same laws. And that's really what we need to know with Magna Carta. With the English Bill of Rights, this further entrenches that idea. Okay, and we see that there's a further limitation on the power of the king. We get a creation of a constitutional monarchy in Great Britain. Okay, and we also see some ideas starting to form that there are certain things that should be given to the citizens of a country. Okay, certain rights, certain freedoms. Okay, these included freedom of speech and the freedom of not being subjected to cruel or unusual punishments. Okay, but that really just applied to the people that were in the government. Okay, then we get into kind of more American stuff. So Mayflower Compact. Okay, this literally is written before the Pilgrims get off the boat. Okay, and they set foot in the New World. And this is the first attempt that we see American colonists try to create a somewhat form of government. Okay, they knew that before they stepped foot in the United States, or not the United States, in the colonies, okay, they would need some type of guidelines, okay, in order to run a society. And so we call this really the first attempt at self-governance. And then the last one, okay, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. I have not seen this on the test, but I am mentioning it just because it's one of those kind of first things. So the fundamental orders are our first attempt at a state constitution that goes on to kind of become a model for other state constitutions. What am I talking about when I say constitution, though? It does have to do with the laws, you're right? Lillian, May 7th. Constitution. Zeke was on the right path. It does have to do with it. So I like laws, I like rights. Constitution is essentially the blueprint for the government. It is a legal document stating what powers the government can and cannot have. Okay, and so it essentially creates the laws of the country. Okay, so it kind of starts to create situations or thinks of situations where the government's going to run into and tries to kind of respond to that. Okay, so it has stuff like how old should the president be? It has stuff like how many years can somebody serve in the Senate? How many years can somebody serve in the House? What are impeachable offenses, which is kind of a little bit vague on that. Okay, what can the different parts of the government do? What, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so this is really the first time where we see an attempt to write a constitution be made. All right. Any questions on early inspirational stuff? Good. Okay. All right. Then we move into our first really big major American document, and that is the Declaration of Independence. Okay, it's exactly how it sounds. This is a formal separation of the American colonies from Great Britain. And this is huge. This is the first time in world history that a colony has separated from the mother country. Okay, it's separated from Great Britain. And so sometimes history teachers like to call this the greatest breakup letter in history, because essentially that's what is happening here. We have a list of grievances or things that the king has done wrong. We are explaining not only to Great Britain, but to the world why the United States is doing what it is doing. Okay, why are the colonies breaking away from Great Britain? Okay, this serves two purposes. One, it serves a purpose to declare independence, but really what it's trying to do is gain allies. We were trying to get countries to recognize us, and when they recognized us diplomatically, that meant that they could legally start to give us aid or trade or loans and stuff like that. The other thing that we need to talk about with the Declaration of Independence is that it really states the unalienable rights or the natural rights. Okay, what do I mean when I say unalienable? Not able to do what? Like, what couldn't the government not do to these rights? They can't change them. Why? They're inherent, so they are natural. You are born with these rights, unalienable. They cannot take it away from you, right? So what these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So some people get this a little twisted, okay, and they think that the Declaration of Independence is a legal document. And so some people will refer back to the Declaration of Independence as some type of law. It's not that. However, what the Declaration does is it kind of sets the tone for how the United States is going to look. And what we see is kind of, we start to try to implement stuff that's going to protect those natural rights. And that is something that you do need to know for your test. The other thing you need to know about for your test is this guy right here, who I find very annoying because he's on every single test and we don't talk about him for a very long time. I also find him annoying because I always butcher his last name. So I'm going to just call him Alexis. Okay. He was a French sociologist who came over to our country very, very kind of soon after the country was created. Okay. So he's going to come over in 1831. So I keep messing this up because I need to move him later in the PowerPoint. But essentially he comes to study in our prisons, and while he is in the United States, he's going to observe kind of this very early country. You have to remember that the United States had just been created, right? This is a brand new country. Nobody had ever tried to do this before. This is a brand new modern democracy. Okay, and he was really interested in how we were trying to get it to work. And so as he goes around the country, he has this big kind of grand tour. Okay, he's going to record his observations in a book titled Democracy in America. And basically, this is a super important book because it gives us a window into early American democracy. And in that book, Alexis de Tocqueville, I can't say it, is going to kind of boil it down to 5 main values that he finds incredibly important to American success and what we consider very important. And these are, and you will, this is the thing with this guy right here. You will see him on the STAAR test. I can almost guarantee he will be there. And they will probably give you a big old fat quote, and they will ask you which one of these values does this quote apply to. Okay? So one thing I forgot to say, for the last 2 weeks, I don't know if you have noticed this, but I've been working on my computer and I've been like going like this the whole time because of the fact that I've been trying to move over questions from release STAAR test over into a big old PowerPoint. So I've gone through every single STAAR test since 2013 to 2018, and on every single test, there is one question about this dude right here. Okay. So his 5 values are liberty. Okay, Americans are obsessed with liberty, according to this guy. And what he means by that is that we firmly believe that we should have freedom from any type of control, restriction, or anything like that. You can see this today with how much of a controversy masks have been. Okay, people have been really upset about masks because they believe it is infringing on their personal liberty. Okay, regardless of where you are in that debate, okay, or why it's a debate, but that is something that has continued throughout American history. Is when people feel like their personal liberties are being infringed upon, that is when we start seeing people really fight back against the American government. Okay, egalitarianism. Not talk today. Essentially what this means is that everyone in the society is equal. Remember that we were coming from a country that has a very entrenched nobility. Okay, in the United States, there was this firm belief that everyone should be considered equal under the law. Now, we know that that doesn't really apply, and we have seen throughout American history in this class, okay, that there has been a fight since the beginning of this country to make sure that that applies to everyone. Okay, but Americans are really concerned about making sure that the society is equal. Okay? Individualism. You should be allowed to freely define yourself and to pursue your own goals and aspirations. Populism. The common people are involved in the government. Okay, it is supposedly a government that is not supposed to benefit the elite. It is designed to work for the common people. Okay? And then laissez-faire, this French word that essentially means hands off. Okay, the government should not be allowed to interfere with the economy. And remember, first thing he notices is liberty. We did not want to be restricted on what we could buy, what we could sell, anything like that. Okay, how the U.S. government has applied this has varied throughout American history too. Okay, so we need to know liberty, egalitarianism, individualism, populism, laissez-faire. I can guarantee he will be on your STAAR test coming May. Okay, gotta know him. Okay. Articles of Confederation. So I do need to move him back because this is a little earlier than him. But Articles of Confederation. Okay, this is our first attempt to form a government. We try to write a constitution that is going to be titled the Articles of Confederation. And it sucks. Okay, it's incredibly weak. And you have to remember, we had just got out of this super strong government, right? We just got out of the British Empire. Okay, we didn't want to go back to something like that again. And so we created this government that was super weak. We didn't have an executive. We did not have a leader. Okay, And this government was horrible because it could not tax, it could not keep states from competing with each other. States were creating their own forms of money. Okay, think about how difficult it would be if you had money, like you had a Massachusetts currency and you tried to go buy something in Georgia, but Georgia has its own currency, and so you couldn't use your Massachusetts money to buy something in Georgia, even though you are technically in the same country. Okay, really what they envisioned was this union of states working together. And I want you to think about how a group project always has someone that drops the ball, and think about how that idea of a group project would be applied to an entire country. That would not work. And this did not work. And so eventually this fails. We eventually get this situation known as the Whiskey Rebellion, where George Washington and Alexander Hamilton themselves are actually going to have to go put it down. And it almost turns into a full-out rebellion or civil war in the United States, very soon after the beginning of the country. So, Articles of Confederation, 2 things we need to know, or 3 things. 1, okay, first attempt at a government. 2, very weak. 3, okay, leads to the Constitution. All right, so let's talk Constitution. This is prompted by how bad the Articles of Confederation are. Okay? Hamilton, John Jay, James Madison are going to try to gain support for the Constitution. Remember, people were very scared of a strong government. And so Hamilton, Jay, and Madison are going to try and convince people by writing a series of papers under no name, known as the Federalist Papers. They are pretty effective. Okay, people who support the Constitution become known as Federalists. All right, now let's talk about our Constitution. So 1, our Constitution creates 3 branches. We have the legislative, executive, and judicial. Let's talk about what these branches are, though. What does the legislative do? Rate the laws. What parts of the government are the legislative, though? We have 2 houses, or 2 chambers. So we have the House of Representatives, and we also have the, starts with an S, Senate, right? So we have a bicameral government, okay, bicameral legislative branch. Okay, there are 2 chambers. House of Representatives based on population. Okay, Senate, okay, is an equal representation. What does the executive branch do? Or let me say this, who is the executive branch? President, right? And then all the departments under the president. Okay, what is the job of the president? So the president's main job is to enforce the law. And this gives me a pretty strong historical example right here. Okay, in 1957, President Eisenhower had to send the army to Little Rock, Arkansas, in order to force the acceptance of the law. Okay, that stated that separation but equal was unconstitutional, and you had to desegregate the schools. Okay, he had to make that decision because the judicial branch, which does what? Say one time. It does what? They don't put it. What were we saying? They don't. So the president will sign it and turn it into a law. Okay, but who makes sure the law is constitutional? And so they have to judge it, right? So legislative laws, executive, enforce, judicial, judge. Okay, who is the judicial branch? The courts, essentially, right? So usually people will just say the Supreme Court, but it also includes all the federal courts under that. Okay. Then, guys, Okay, we have our 3 branches, but we also have 6 big ideas. Hey, Kevin. Okay, we have limited government. Okay, there are things that the government can and cannot do. Republicanism, we are going to create a government that is going to be made up of representatives voted on by the people to vote for them. Checks and balances, what is this stuff? What's checks and balances? Right, so we are very concerned that someone's going to gain more power. So we put kind of these little like checkpoints to make sure, or powers to each branch to make sure that they can kind of keep the other one from growing too much. Hey, can anybody tell me a check or about, or like an example of a check? What can the president do if they don't like a law? There's a V word, very important. They can veto it, okay, which means they can basically eliminate it. If the president vetoes it, what can the legislative branch do though? They can override it by a vote. Okay, what branch can declare war? Legislative, executive, or judicial? Legislative. Okay, that's a big deal because that means that the part of the government that we vote on, okay, to represent ourselves is the one that can declare war, which means that if the United States goes to war, technically, that means that the people support it, right? Because our representatives are voting on our behalf because we are technically a democratic republic. Okay, we already know what separation of powers is. Popular sovereignty, we saw this in 2020. Okay, popular sovereignty is the idea that the power comes from the people. So if the people do not support whoever is in charge or has power, they can vote to get that person out of power. So in 2020, people decided to vote out Trump. They decided to give that power to Biden. We'll see how that goes in 2024. Okay, but that is essentially how American government should work. And then last slide, guys. So we have supporters of the Constitution, but we still have a lot of people that are afraid that it's going to trample on American liberties and freedoms. In a compromise, we give those people, the anti-federalists, okay, amendments to the Constitution, changes, and those first 10 changes get this fancy nickname of the Bill of Rights. Okay. And we have talked amendments the entire year. Does anybody know how many amendments we have total? 27, absolutely. Okay, but the first 10 are only the ones that are referred to as the Bill of Rights. It's not all 27. Okay, and so guys, we need to know definitely First Amendment, okay, which we can sometimes call RAPS, because it stands for religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. Another one I've seen on the test a lot is the 10th Amendment, okay, which technically says that rights not granted in the Constitution belong to the people, but it also contains this super important idea of eminent domain. Okay, if the government is going to take your property, they have to compensate you a fair amount. So if the government wants to build a highway and it's going to run over your house, the government can make you move, but they have to pay you the proper appropriate amount for your property. Yeah. All right. Guys, I know that's quick. That was literally 6 slides. Okay, that we spent about 3 weeks on, I think, in the beginning. Anybody have any questions? Okay. So we are going to play GimKit. Give me 1 sec to get that up.